are now going to hear from one of the big guns, as they were in the amateur radio community, Tim Duffy, K3LR, very, very well-known contester. He has a modest ham radio station out in western Pennsylvania on the Pennsylvania Ohio border, and he is also now the CEO of a ham radio company many may be familiar with, DX Engineering. And he has won many ham radio contests, and by knowing things about the ionosphere, by having some contest strategy, by building teams of operators to staff his station. And so I asked him in this talk, I said, Tim, are there things that you have seen over the years in your contest operation that, you know, maybe you don't understand, but, you know, maybe the HamSCI community could help answer? And so that was the question I asked him when I asked him to put this talk together. So he came up with the title saying, let's push the exploration of the ionosphere to the next level. So with that, I would like to introduce Tim Duffy, K3LR.
Thanks very much, Nathaniel. It's great to be here, and thanks very much for your kind invitation. I'm here at the studios and transmitters of K3LR this evening, surrounded by 13 towers that we go from 1.8 to 30 megahertz here, and after that, it's a vast new world above that. But I really am excited about the talks that we saw today, and those talks certainly surround the SDR projects that are going on. And just to dovetail on a little bit of what Diego was doing, the real key to getting more of these skimmer sites that can be used to help feed some of these networks like the RBN and WhisperNet is cost and then availability to the internet. There are so many holes in Africa, in Asia, certainly South America. These are places that would really benefit the data that we're able to collect if only they were there and they had connectivity to the internet. But I also want to focus a little bit on some things that I didn't hear talked about today, and that is some data that's available that might be able to be used by the HamSCI committee or group, maybe to find additional things about the ionosphere. And what these are logs from from the largest DX contest on the planet. And I'm talking about the CQ Worldwide Phone and CW contest. And I want to give you some statistics just from last fall. So this was in October of 2019. This is the CQ Worldwide Phone Contest. There were 7,700 logs of QSOs that were submitted to the CQ committee for checking. In those logs contained contacts made by 46,000 different stations from 215 countries. And those 46,000 stations made 3.1 million contacts in that weekend. Conversely, the CW weekend, which enjoyed better conditions, better solar weather, there were 7,800 logs there. 33,000 stations participated from 198 countries, making 4.5 million contacts. And the great thing about these logs is there are 14 years worth of public data available right from the CQWW.com website. And so if there were data mining programs that could go in, and obviously we know what the solar weather was during those two operating events, and we know what it was actually for all 14 years, I think that that's another level of data that could be used by HamSCI to figure out more things in the ionosphere. It's right there. As part of WWROF, we have been funding drives that have been used to actually record the contest on 1 terabyte drives at 10 different sites around the world. So in the adjudication of these contest logs, we can actually go to the actual contact that was claimed to have happened on the air from these 10 different locations. And we have several years worth of data like that for both the CW and phone contest. Again, that might be very valuable to HamSCI as we take a look at things within the ionosphere. That integration real time with solar weather that comes out of NOAA and other places, really, if it was combined real time with what's going on the WSPR and the PSK reporter and the RBN and even the NCDXF beacon network, I think that that would be a very interesting integration to actually leverage multiple sources together in real time to try and give people, whether they're in education, whether it's commercial, or whether it's amateur radio, a better picture of how to utilize the frequency spectrum that amateur radio operators have, that commercial operators have, and really integrating those things, I think would be fascinating. Another fascinating thing, here at K3LR, we have several arrays of stacked antennas that allows us to vary the vertical takeoff angle, depending upon what combination we feed those antennas at any given time. And for instance, on the 14 megahertz band on 20 meters, we have 4 Yagis that are in a stack, and they start at 230 feet and go down to 50 feet. Well, there are 10 different combinations that I have given the operators here the ability to use, which all develop 10 different takeoff angles. And of course, those takeoff angles vary with the terrain that is presented in front of the azimuth of those arrays. But having even something as simple as a Raspberry Pi programmed to actually sit there and run against the RBN in real time and do the switching to determine what is the best combination of these antennas at any given time, I think would also open our eyes to some of the things that are going on in the ionosphere. The other thing that I think, when Nathaniel posed that question to me, I thought I would love to have a predictor. And what would be the predictor? Well, it would basically take a look at the propagation that is going on up to 2 or 3 days before a particular contest event. And of course, this could be used for commercial applications and educational applications as well. And what I mean by that is actually taking and churning through the RBN data and getting a knowledge of a trend, or using the WSPR network to get trends on what times various bands open to various areas of the world. In DX contests, it's very valuable to have QSOs with Europe. And knowing how the European opening may have occurred in days leading up to it can be very, very valuable to amateur radio contests. But you can see by the sheer number of QSOs that goes on. I mean, when I think about the whole personal space weather station project, and thinking about that there are some 300,000 active HF stations worldwide. Now, many of those are small stations. They might have a vertical antenna or a wire antenna, and from a transmitter standpoint, they might only be 100 watts. But that's a lot of stations. And even in the US, there are well over 100,000 US HF stations that all could be leveraged by the HamSCI project. And some amount of them will be. And I really think that there'll be a lot of momentum as you start to roll out the personal space weather stations. I think that is just an absolutely fascinating project. And amateur radio operators by nature want to help and want to contribute. And what better way? I mean, you can get on the air and have a lot of fun when you're transmitting and receiving, but there's certainly a lot of dead time. And I've had discussions with Nathaniel and saying, the antennas here at K3LR could really be used for research. We've got a big internet pipe here. For about 4 months out of the year, we are contributing to the RBN with a full suite of Perseus SDR receivers. However, I can't wait to upgrade those to the Tangerine. I'm very ready to do that, and we'll actually dedicate one Tangerine to each one of the HF contest bands. And so I'm very hopeful as soon as those are ready to do that and make it a real cornerstone for the HamSCI contribution to the great hobby of amateur radio. So in closing, I want to thank all of you for your contributions to science, your helpful interest in amateur radio, your professionalism, and I look forward to tomorrow to hearing more fascinating talks. I mean, I have only been away from the computer for a few minutes today, and it's just been nonstop. It is definitely like drinking from a fire hose, though, because some of the, and I'm going to go back and take a look at the recorded sessions, just because there's so much value here. And I promoted this conference on the CQ contest reflector this morning. So easy, because you could click on the YouTube link, and I got a lot of good reaction back from that. And that went to over 4,000 people around the world. So I'm sure people come and go. I'm sure some of them will take a look at the recordings, and wow, you know, you almost say, why do we need to get together in person when you can do this? This has been just phenomenally successful. So Nathaniel, congratulations to you and your team and all the presenters. And if there are any questions, I'm available here, and that's it for tonight.
Thank you so much, Tim. I really appreciate that. And I see virtual clapping in the comments there. And first thing I want to say is I think your suggestions are really fantastic. Phil Erickson was pointing out that he really liked your idea of you know, potentially steering in real time your station based on incoming data. So these are things we'll have, these are ideas that we'll have to you know, work on over the next few years. Okay, so with that, yeah, why don't we open up the floor to people who'd like to ask Tim questions, and we aren't as pressed for time now too, so go ahead and ask some questions.
Tim, this is Phil Erickson. I wondered if you could make a little extra comment. You know, I know that super contest stations like you know, it's quite a friendly competition, and you all work together quite a bit. And so, for example, you and W3LPL and other people who operate a station at that level of capability, it sounds to me like from your comments, it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to get people to sort of buy into the kind of things that you've already been talking about doing in terms of kind of using the station when it's not in active contest mode as a directed remote receiver. And I wonder, knowing that community intimately well, what thoughts you have about that.
Phil, I think that it would be an excellent opportunity to share. You know, I've been to Arecibo several times, and you see that the scientists come and go all remotely, and, you know, sign up for time with the various antennas that they have there to do research. And you know, this is no Arecibo here, but we've got some tremendously large antenna systems. And of course, Frank, W3LPL, has also got a lot of, you know, just superior antennas that could be used for research as well. And in fact, Phil, after every competition, we actually, between Frank's team and the K3LR team, we actually trade logs very soon after the contest is over to actually dive deep down in the weeds and see just how propagation and various nuances of operators plays into how the contest unfolded and why things happened the way they did. You know, why did W3LPL have a better opportunity to work European stations on 15 meters, for instance, in this past contest? And it all ties back to the ionosphere and the solar weather conditions. So, but you know, there's so much dead time, Phil, that you could really, you know, spin this thing around and really do some valuable research.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. And before I let other people talk, the other thing I know that you have developed is an intuition. You know, you wouldn't be this successful unless you had a feel for what things work during what time. And I think there are frankly clues in even just the tribal wisdom and the conventional feel that you have based on sitting in that chair about what works when, that we could translate into hints, kind of, you know, okay, there may be something here. We hadn't thought about looking in that space. Maybe we should go look there. So even collecting that wisdom and getting into the collective here, I think would also be a really valuable thing.
It really would be, Phil. If I take a look at the 3 best QSOs that have ever been done from here, and this station has existed for 33 years. We've been in these multi-mega category contests for 27 years. The number 1 QSO just happened here in January on the 160 meter band, where we worked Mongolia. And of course it was a big station on the other end, but that's a very, very hard contact to make. And I believe that opening lasted less than 5 minutes. Another one of my favorite contacts was long path on 10 meters. So this was done at 150 degrees azimuth. So you're going over the south tip of Africa on the way to Malaysia. And it wasn't during the sunspot peak. And in fact, Carl and I corresponded about that. And he had some very good insights about that. And then the other one, which was a difficult contact because it was on what we call the bent path, where you go into the South Pacific, and we worked China on 75 meters. And that's a very, very hard path. But if these things that have happened, this intuition that you talk about, because once it happens, it's in my head and it's in the operator's head, but that's all the farther it goes. And we'd really love to share that.
I think it's a really great thing to share too, because it's really nice to go from that stage of intuition to that stage of, okay, we're actually testing this in a scientific manner, getting it written down and putting it into the literature. And that is a big step, trying to go from that hypothesis or that hunch to actually getting it shown in the literature. And I think this is a really good place where we can make that happen.
In the comments, I will point out that Liz McDonald points out, citizen scientist is where the scientist listens to the wisdom already out there in the community, and that's just what we've said.
Yeah. And I think it's another really nice thing to note is that along those lines, scientists, we are so used to looking at things a certain way. So we have some sort of implicit filter on. So being able to hear the experiences of the experienced people who use, the ham radio operators who use the propagation on a regular basis, they have a different perspective, and it can really open up new ideas.
Terry W0ASP with a question.
Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Tim, what other geophysical data do you use to correlate your propagation data? So
I'm very fortunate that on the team we have a great engineer. It's N2NC, John Galome, who has really made it his passion to research what is going on with solar weather before, during, and after the contest. And he looks at a lot of different things to get his intuition around what's going to happen. And a lot of it is out of NOAA. And it's also even as simple as the WWV numbers. But he has a list of about 4 different websites that he watches during the weekend, and he helps steer us. He is so valuable on so many fronts. But so we sort of have an onboard scientist as part of the team that is really fascinated with propagation, and he uses the information on the web to really give us some insight into things we should look at.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answer, and thank you for providing high quality products to the amateur radio community.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions for Tim?
Yeah, I had one.
Go ahead, Aiden.
Yeah, so one thing I was wondering, do you have a sense of what kind of data presentations or what kind of either visualizations or results or things might be most useful? Because I imagine the science community has their preferred way of looking at things. But if we're talking about giving hams a way to look at what's happening at their station and tune their results, short of putting on some magic goggles where you can look up and see the ionosphere in real time, what kind of presentation would be most useful to you to show what's going on?
I think real-time charts and graphs, that are not overly complicated, and then really strip it down into the real-time. Tell us about absorption. There was a lot of discussion today about polar paths, and that's a very risky situation where in several of these most recent contests, the polar paths get shut down, or they suffer from high absorption, and therefore you don't hear anybody from Finland, from Norway, from Sweden, and as you go lower in frequency, it becomes even more challenging. So Aidan, I thank you very much for your question, and I really think it's real-time charts and graphs that focus in on the amateur radio bands, so the 160 meters and 20 meters and 10 meters, etc.
And I think that's a really good idea. And I've actually talked with I had lunch with Tamitha at the I think it was at AGU this past year, and we were talking about some of these things, and she was saying how developing some of these real-time graphs could be really important. So we had her on at lunch again today, and so yeah, maybe working with her and with you over the next couple years, we could try to develop some of those sorts of things. So I was talking with Tamitha, maybe we have space weather, more of these operations be the theme of next year's HamSCI workshop, and we could start working toward, what would some of these displays look like, especially as we try to develop the personal space weather station.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Nathaniel, I'm on now.
Hi, Tamitha. Do you want to say anything?
Actually, yes. I was trying to wait my turn and be patient. But since you brought me up, I guess I'll jump in. Yes, Tim. Did I hear you correctly? Your station goes up to 1.8. Are you talking gigahertz?
No. It goes down to 1.8 megahertz.
Okay. What in the world? I was thinking, good night. What kind of antennas are you using? Okay,
Well, it's a pretty good 1.8 megahertz antenna, but it's very large.
Okay. Got it. One of the things I was curious about is, obviously, as Nathaniel had alluded to, I'm very interested in the whole concept of trying to make this, try to get up the nowcasting, because I think that's going to be critical for first responders. It's also critical to kind of demonstrate to the meteorological community what the capabilities are. You always have to kind of have the torch and clear the path and march forward before people can actually see what it is you're trying to do, and then they go, oh, I get it now. But you have to put all the pieces together and actually have a working, methodology, a working model, and a demonstration in order for that to happen. So yes, I'm very with you on the whole nowcasting aspect, and Nathaniel and I did talk about it at AGU. One of the things I'm curious about, though, and I have to say this from a global perspective, because I talk, all of it, obviously, ham radio operators talk to people all over the world, but as I'm trying to do forecasting, I also have people that are all over the world. And just like terrestrial weather, space weather is very localized, as anyone who works in the ionosphere knows. And so what I would love to see and ping you about is whether or not you're going to get a sister station somewhere else in the world. Could there ever be anything like that, where you actually could end up having, either by partnering with people in Europe or in other countries, have stations that are moderately similar, so that with similar setup, so that when you do all your ionospheric sounding with your amazing setup, obviously the world rotates and the world turns. And now let's say there happens to be a space weather event or something going on, you're now rotating, let's say, to the night side, and your local time is totally different, and now you're experiencing a totally different kind of space weather. But the space weather that is very fascinating is, still happening on the day side, let's say. So how do you, is it ever conceivable in, I don't know, the not too distant future, to consider trying to set up stations that are global monitors, very similar to the way we have, for instance, solar telescopes that are, global, that as one rotates away, the next one takes over, and they're kind of intercalibrated. And you understand my point, hopefully.
Yes, yes, and I think it's very possible because there are large amateur radio stations in many countries, the size that K3LR is or W3LPL, there are several scattered around the world, and with the help of the internet, all of that data could be accumulated in real time. And then it's up to the scientific community, led by HamSCI, to actually write software that can process that in real time. And your vision is spot on. And so that could be a great predictor, because if it's, going on the other side of the world, eventually it's going to get here. And so I'd love to know, that gets me very excited.
Tim, on a related note, this is Bill Engelke, AB4EJ. I'm going to be doing some of the software, some of the visualization software they're talking about. I'd like to get with you offline sometime and talk through some ideas on some of that stuff. We have some ideas already, but to get more feedback from practitioners is always enormously helpful.
Yeah, I think that's very important. The personal space weather station, part of it is for the science, and part of it is to make sure that we are helping the amateur radio community too. So we really want to get feedback from people who are really, really active amateur radio operators, telling us what's going to work for them and what won't.
Nathaniel, I thought you had a question from our friend Angel down in Puerto Rico.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, so Angel down in Puerto Rico at Arecibo, he was asking you, Tim, if you wouldn't mind sharing those websites that you use to look at the at space weather for the contests.
Yes, so I will send those, so you can get them up on the Google Drive area, and so we'll put all that together and make it available to everybody.
Thank you very much. And Angel says hello. WP3R.
Yes, hello, Angel.
Well, I think we are coming to a good spot to close for the day. So I want to thank all of our presenters and all of our attendees and all of our panelists and everyone who's really come together at the last minute to really make this what I think is a smashing success. And I think, not only this has been a very good workshop for a number of reasons. One, because I think it was just a fantastic space weather, space science, and amateur radio workshop. And two, I think we're really doing something, we're in a bit of a leadership capacity here, leading in a world where things are not looking so great right now. So it's really nice to be in a position where we're able to keep going with our lives, and we're able to do something very positive, even in the midst of difficulty. And really, this would not have been possible without all of you. And I'd like to especially recognize my science and program committee. I know that I'm often the voice of the organization for all of this, but I've been working with Phil Erickson and Liz McDonald and her program project manager, rather, Laura Brandt, and Bill Lyles, and a few other people, Catherine Mitchell, to really pull together the ideas to really make sure that this workshop is a good workshop and it flows smoothly. And so I could not have done it without them and without many other people here at the University of Scranton, just many, many people. So with that, I'm going to close the workshop for today. We will reconvene using the same webinar link tomorrow. The YouTube link may change, but I will post that tomorrow when I have that new YouTube link. And so we'll meet again. I'll open the session up around 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. I'll give another brief review of what amateur radio is and how we're connecting it to the Aurora. And then tomorrow is really our Auroral Connection Day, especially in the morning, where we're going to be hearing from Dr. Liz McDonald and Dr. Jim LaBelle and Dave Halliday, all talking about how amateur radio and the Aurora are connected together, and auroral science and radio science are connected together. And then in the afternoon, we'll have the e-poster session. Again, we have part focused on the Aurora, and then also a number of great HamSCI posters as well. So with that, I will close out the session.